How would they look like? Well, there aren't any. All the Mamelukes were slaughtered by those same colonial forces which slaughtered the samurais of Japan, the red-haired people of Peru, and all other communities which kept some of the old knowledge and old history. It's very convenient. When you kill them all, then you can make up any story you wish about them, and there will be nobody to object. According to the official history, Egypt was freed from the oppressive Mamelukes by the Western European military forces. And let's see when the Christian Western Europeans freed their Christian brothers, the Copts, in Egypt, what did they do with them? Normally, one would expect, if that situation was true, that they would rejoice meeting other similarly minded people who glorified their Lord Jesus Christ. The truth is, they didn't care about any Jesus Christ. The monasteries laid in ruins, churches were plundered, the leaders of the clergy, no record of them. The Coptic Christianity was still pure. It still had the original message of Jesus Christ about how to modify the reality we live in with the power of our thoughts and intentions. The soldiers of the parasites quarantined the Coptic Christianity for some 50 years, waiting for one generation to die and forget the truth, and after that they kindly allow it to revive itself and resurrect again, but with changed ideology. They removed the original message of Christ and substituted it with parasitic so-called Christianity, which emphasizes that humans are slaves, powerless slaves. They cannot do anything but wait for some unknown mercy. Nobody knows if it will come and how, but you should wait because you cannot do anything else. You are powerless. So just wait, although you're not sure what you're waiting for, but you wait, and while you wait, you the powerless slave, don't forget to be obedient, otherwise God will be angry, of course, and don't forget to pay your taxes, of course. And all these philosophies are far away from the original teachings of Christ, who taught powerful techniques of learning how to use the magical powers which we all have. The ideology of the early Copts, those before the Copt Reformation by the foreigners, their ideology was so near to the Egyptian ideology, or at least as much as we can find out about it from the translated hieroglyphic texts, that even mainstream sources don't deny that the Copts are direct continuation of that line of thinking. But how could that be possible if the so-called ancient Egyptian culture, which had that ideology, thrived thousands of years ago, and the Copts relatively recently? As I explained earlier, one of the prime instruments in fabrication of the fraudulent history was to drive important events in culture way back in the past to make them look unimportant and irrelevant to us. The kingdoms of the Egyptian pharaohs were also artificially shifted to the faraway past, but in reality the last pharaohs were Christian themselves. Christ appeared in the already rotting from within society of the survivors to restore the truth. That is why the original pure Christianity was popular amongst the various cultures all around the globe of whom the survivors were bedrock, and there is no wonder that we see Christianity amongst the last pharaoh kingdoms of Egypt. Mainstream historians are persistently trying to hide the very obvious and clear connection between the Copts and the pharaohs, and the ambiguous phrases like, for example, they say the magical and medicinal literature of the Copts is a direct continuation of the ancient Egyptian one.
Now listen to a short passage quote from these ancient Egyptian so-called magical texts. They don't even call them directly Christian because it will look silly, but here it is.
Hor, hor, for, El Eloi, Adonai, Yahweh, Savov, Michael, Jesus, help us and our homes. Amen.
This type of obviously Christian prayers they call magical spells of the pharaohs, and as usual, conveniently forget to tell us the exact quotes, but will speak hours about its meaning. And all this is done to bamboozle us, to make us not notice the obvious connection between Christianity and the last pharaohs.
This is one of the items in the burial of Tutankhamun. Is there any need of commentary? Well, this is a Christian cross.
This could have been the dagger of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. It is decorated with European animals. But of course we are not sure if it was really his, because this full story with the alleged discovery of his tomb is fake. But still, some of the artifacts are genuine, not sure which ones exactly, and probably they were taken from another tomb in the vicinity of the actually forged tomb of Tutankhamun. Again, the team of Anatoly Fomenko studied this tomb of Tutankhamun. They went there a few times, and I think they have the best resources on this matter, because many have discussed the possible forgery of this alleged tomb discovery.
Everybody knows that many of the ancient Egyptian paintings, or maybe at this point we should stop calling them ancient, but since they are famous as being ancient, excuse me if sometimes I still say that by mistake. So those are full of crosses, and if somebody still doubts that those crosses by chance look like Christian crosses, here on this one you can see the Christian cross in its this is not exact the time when supposedly some ancient Egyptian temples were subsequently converted into churches, as the mainstream historians cunningly try to convince us. Here is another Christian cross that they have forgotten to hide, and it's still visible amongst the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic signs. And this is another one laying there in the corner in one of the ancient Egyptian temples. Two ancient Egyptian statues with Christian crosses on their back. And these are Coptic images. The crosses are very, very similar to the Egyptian crosses. Here are a few more Egyptian Ankh crosses. And so, sometime in the end of the 18th century, some Jesuits are being sent to Egypt to start fabricating the future image of ancient Egypt as we know it nowadays, and which is absolute historical fiction. Remember earlier it was exactly Jesuits who took a very active part in fabricating the books that would serve as the basis of the fictional history during the Reformation period. Egyptology as science started existing very late in the 19th century. At that time, the Scaliger version of history was already widely accepted as scientific, and the Egyptologists were forced to adjust everything to fit those mistaken axioms that were laying the basis of the timeline of Scaliger. And if they would disagree with the Scaliger timeline, they wouldn't be employed as official scientists anymore, very much like today actually. Sometimes so-called ancient sources are quoted to support the Scaliger-Pitavius timeline of Egyptian history. However, please be aware that, for example, the most famous of them, the work of Manethon, is not available in original nowadays. And so if you see some quote from Manethon, well, it is very easy to manufacture all of that, to fabricate it, because the original is no longer available. So you can put any fantasy and label it as coming from Manethon, no problem. And so is the situation with all other so-called ancient sources. As far as the official history of the various dynasties and times of rule, of reign of various pharaohs, that was easily fabricated by Hennry Brouch, who approached the matter in a very practical way. He took various lists from the temple carvings. Some of them definitely were names of pharaohs. Others was not sure, but he took some lists that he liked, and also assuming, according to his liking, that those were only pharaohs. Others, they didn't fit so well, so declared them mythology, and did not include them. And then to fix easily the dates of their reign, he just decided that everybody has ruled 33 years, or to be more exact, 100 years for every 3 pharaohs. And that is how this full history was cooked and was ready to be served to the public as science. Egypt was one of the most important centers of the culture of the survivors. Over there, the knowledge of the magical abilities of the humans was kept alive until few hundred years ago by Copts and Mamelukes, and that is why it was very important for the soldiers of the parasites to distort the Egyptian history in such a monstrous way. And so people are confused. There is one thing in the history books, but the actual artifacts point towards completely different story, and they don't know what to think. Did aliens build all this? Because according to history we could not have built them. We were barely coming out from the monkeys.
The myth that it was Champollion who deciphered the hieroglyphs is very popular.
But if you delve even a little bit in history, you will easily find out that people were reading the hieroglyphs even before that. The problem with reading them the traditional way was that full passages with Bible content were shining from the walls of the Egyptian temples, and that was not allowed because those temples were artificially sent thousands of years back in history. There was a dictionary, so to say, guide how to read the hieroglyphs by Horapolum, and that was natural to exist because when in Egypt they shifted from hieroglyphs to other writings, there was the need of a dictionary, and Horapolum compiled it, and it worked fine. If it was